The courtroom was heavy with silence, a silence so complete that every creak of a chair, every shuffle of foot, seemed magnified. Reporters held their pens in midair. Lawyers paused, frozen by the tension. Even the judge, who had presided over countless cases, lowered his gaze and removed his glasses, as if bracing himself for what was about to unfold. For weeks, the nation had waited, consumed by speculation and fear, desperate for any shred of truth. Menglong, a man whose life had once been filled with promise, laughter, and admiration, had become a symbol of unanswered questions, of shadows no one dared to illuminate. Today, that darkness would confront them all. The video began with a dimly lit street, rain dripping steadily onto the pavement. Each droplet reflected the faint glow of streetlights, casting fractured patterns that danced on the wet asphalt. Then a figure appeared, stumbling and exhausted, a young man soaked through by rain and by fear. Menglong's presence on the screen was almost surreal, fragile and raw, a stark contrast to the polished image the public had known. The audience felt a collective shiver as he pressed a trembling hand to his chest, knees buckling beneath him. His weakness was human, painfully real, and for the first time, everyone saw the man behind the headlines. As the camera lingered on him, his lips quivered and he struggled to speak. "If anything happens to me, please don't let them lie about it." The words were barely audible, yet they struck the courtroom with the weight of 1,000 truths. Gasps echoed through the space. Those present, who had long debated facts, evidence, and legal procedures, were suddenly confronted with the raw vulnerability of a life at risk. His plea was not for fame or sympathy, but for honesty, a final attempt to secure truth when he himself could no longer ensure it. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Menglong's mother could not contain herself. She reached for her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Her cries, muffled yet piercing, filled the room, blending with the whispered words of friends and legal aides attempting to offer comfort. But she shook them off, whispering over and over, "That's my son, that's my baby," around her. The courtroom dissolved into a sea of trembling shoulders and misted eyes. For a fleeting moment, the sterile formality of legal procedure was shattered by grief too human to suppress. The video continued, capturing Menglong's final moments. He looked directly into the camera, eyes glistening with tears and fear, and whispered fragments of his thoughts. It was not a performance, not a plea for attention. It was an urgent, intimate confession, raw and unfiltered. He leaned against the pavement, exhausted, as though carrying the weight of his entire life and the burdens of those around him in one fragile frame. Each breath, each tremor of his lips, spoke volumes of the terror and helplessness he endured. Witnessing it, no one in the courtroom could remain composed. Even those trained to witness tragedy, without reaction, faltered. Journalists lowered their notebooks, unable to record the scene. Lawyers averted their eyes, trying to hold back their own tears. And the judge, usually a pillar of control, pressed a hand to his mouth, as if bracing for the grief that had permeated the room. The father, stoic for months, collapsed, burying his face in his hands. The sound of his quiet sobs carried a weight beyond measure, resonating with anyone who has loved and lost. It was a grief that demanded attention, a mourning that words could not contain. As the footage unfolded, the public absorbed it with disbelief and sorrow. From office cubicles to crowded buses, from dimly lit homes to the corners of city streets, people watched Menglong struggle against fate. They paused their lives, if only for a moment, to witness his humanity. The overwhelming truth was inescapable. Menglong had been frightened, isolated, pleading for justice when none seemed forthcoming. This was no ordinary video. It was an intimate, heart-wrenching testament to the fragility of life and the resilience of truth. The final moments of the footage were almost unbearable. Menglong, soaked and exhausted, whispered words that were barely audible but impossible to ignore. "I didn't deserve this." The simplicity of the statement, the honesty, pierced the hearts of all who listened. In those words lay the innocence lost, the fear endured, and injustices that had been ignored for too long. The courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in grief shared collectively, a wave of sorrow that transcended rank, position, and expectation. Outside, the nation grappled with the weight of what they had seen. The video was shared across social media. spreading like wildfire. People paused mid-commute, eyes brimming with tears. Parents hugged their children a little tighter. Strangers in cafes leaned closer to one another, speaking in hushed tones about the fragility of life and the importance of truth. What had begun as a legal proceeding had transformed into a national moment of mourning, reflection, and awakening. Yu Menglong was no longer just a name in a report. He was a person, a son, a human being who had faced unimaginable fear and injustice. The aftermath of the video was palpable. Conversations shifted from conjecture to empathy. Citizens demanded answers, accountability, and recognition of the humanity that had been overlooked. The case, once a collection of files, testimonies, and speculation, now carried the weight of a life unjustly threatened and a voice that could no longer speak for itself. Yu Menglong's final words were no longer whispers in the video. They became a call to conscience, reverberating across the nation, demanding reflection, responsibility, and change. In the courtroom, the silence that followed the video was profound. No one dared speak, for any words would feel insufficient. The judge, shaking, finally announced a recess, yet no one moved. All were caught in the aftermath of witnessing a life's end with an intimacy they had never expected. The weight of grief was heavy, but it was also transformative, opening eyes and hearts to the stark realities often hidden behind the headlines. Yu Menglong's legacy is not only in the sorrow he left behind, but in the truths he dared to speak when his life was slipping away. His final plea, simple yet potent, "Please don't let them lie," became a rallying point, a reminder that justice and truth are not abstract ideals but urgent human needs. His voice, fragile and trembling, continues to resonate, demanding attention, reflection, and compassion from all who hear it. The courtroom will never be the same, nor will the nation that watched. Yu Menglong's life, tragically cut short, has become a mirror reflecting the fragility of humanity, the necessity of justice, and the enduring power of a voice that refuses to be silenced. In his final moments, he left more than a plea. He left a legacy that challenges the world to honor truth, to recognize the humanity in every life, and to remember that even in the face of darkness, a single voice can illuminate what has long been hidden. The rain in the video, once a backdrop to his final struggle, now seems symbolic, a cleansing, a reminder that sorrow and truth cannot be contained indefinitely. As families, friends, and the nation mourn, Yu Menglong's last words echo far beyond the confines of Courtroom. They remind everyone that every life matters, every voice deserves to be heard, and even in the most painful moments, truth has the power to awaken, transform, and endure. The story of Yu Menglong is not just a tragedy. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unyielding need for honesty, remembrance, and justice. Even after the video ended, the echoes of Yu Menglong's final words lingered like a shadow over everyone who had witnessed them. Outside the courtroom, the world seemed different, heavier, yet impossibly clearer. The weight of a life cut short pressed down on families, friends, and strangers alike. Social media feeds were flooded with messages of grief, outrage, and disbelief. People shared not just a video, but their own stories of loss and unanswered questions, resonating deeply with Yu Menglong's desperate plea for truth. He had asked that no one let lies survive, and in that moment, the nation began to listen, not with judgment, but with aching empathy that few had expected. Inside the courtroom, families remained silent, clinging to one another, their faces wet with tears, their eyes reflecting the pain of watching a life struggle so painfully against forces it could not overcome. Yet beneath the sorrow, a quiet determination began to stir. They realized that his voice, weak yet unyielding, had not been silenced entirely. It had transcended the screen, demanding action, demanding acknowledgement, and most of all, demanding remembrance. In their grief, they found purpose. The families of Yu Menglong became more than mourners. They became bearers of a truth that could no longer be ignored. News outlets scrambled to cover the unfolding reactions. Experts debated the implications of the video. Citizens questioned every official report that had been released before. Every frame, every word Yu Menglong had spoken, was dissected with painstaking care. But no analysis could fully capture the human weight of what had been revealed. His fear, his courage, his vulnerability. It was all too palpable, too raw. And perhaps that rawness is what gripped people most. For once, the abstract debates over justice were replaced by an unshakable sense of human responsibility. People didn't just read about a tragedy, they felt it. The most haunting aspect of footage was not the details of his final moments, but the way Yu Menglong looked directly into the camera, directly into the hearts of those who would witness it later. There was a haunting clarity in his gaze, an unspoken message that the world was watching and that someone, somewhere needed to act. In that gaze was trust, and in that trust lay a challenge. To ensure that the truth he left behind would not be buried by negligence, by bureaucracy, or by indifference. His voice became a mirror, reflecting not only the tragedy of a single life lost, but the broader moral responsibility that every citizen shares when injustice is allowed to thrive. And so, the narrative shifted. Yu Menglong's story was no longer merely a scandal or a news headline. It became a movement of awareness, of collective accountability. People everywhere began to ask themselves, what more could they do? How could they honor a life that had ended too soon? Families shared videos and testimonies. Activists organized online forums, and journalists dug deeper into cases that had long been neglected. Every word he had spoken, the plea for honesty, the warning against lies, ignited an emotional awakening that no official report could ever convey. Amid the national grief, the emotional resonance of Yu Menglong's last moments also sparked private reflection. Parents watched, hugging their children a little closer, whispering reminders to cherish every day. Friends reached out across divides, mending relationships that had been fragile, recognizing that life was far too fleeting for grudges. Individuals who had remained silent in the face of injustice found courage in his vulnerability. The young, the old, the curious, and the empathetic alike all felt an awakening that transcended personal experience. A voice that had been silenced in life now roared in collective consciousness, demanding recognition and action. For those who had loved him, there was profound heartbreak. Yet, even in grief, there was also a sense of purpose, a fragile but unwavering determination to preserve the integrity of his story. Yu Menglong's mother, father, and close friend began to speak out more openly, sharing memories of a son who had been vibrant, compassionate, and endlessly kind. They recounted moments that revealed his humor, his warmth, and his unwavering sense of justice. Through their words, Yu Menglong lived on, not merely as a victim, but as a symbol of courage and humanity. The love he had inspired could no longer be confined to private mourning. It demanded recognition, and it demanded change. As the public absorbed the truth, online communities buzzed with discussion. Fans of Yu Menglong shared tributes, edited clips, and heartfelt messages that transcended borders. The intensity of emotion was palpable. Outrage, sorrow, empathy, and a deep, aching longing for justice intertwined in every post. But beyond the anger and grief, there was a profound sense of connection. Strangers became allies in shared mourning, communities formed around remembrance, and individuals committed to keeping Yu Menglong's story alive. His final words, fragile yet resolute, had become a rallying cry for truth and compassion that no one could ignore. And yet, the story was not over. For every revelation in the courtroom, every tear shed, and every message shared, the world understood that the responsibility to uphold justice now rested with them. Yu Menglong's voice had transcended time and circumstance, leaving an indelible mark that demanded vigilance, care, and action. What had once been tragedy was now a call to conscience. The nation had witnessed the vulnerability of a life taken too soon, and in doing so, had been awakened to the power of truth and empathy. For the viewers, the fans, and for anyone who had ever felt powerless, Yu Menglong's story became a personal reminder. Every voice matters, every life has value, and every act of courage, no matter how small, can resonate far beyond its origin. The impact of seeing his final moments in vivid detail was profound, leaving an emotional imprint that would not fade easily. It was a lesson in empathy, in humanity, and in enduring significance of standing for truth, even when it seems impossible. As the nation reflected on the heartbreak and the lessons Yu Menglong had left behind, there emerged a quiet but undeniable hope. A hope that people would no longer look away. A hope that his struggle would not be forgotten, and that his voice, though silenced in life, would continue to guide and inspire change. Families who once felt helpless now carried a shared determination to honor his memory. Friends, fans, and strangers alike felt compelled to engage, to speak, to act, not for fame, not for recognition, but because they understood that truth and justice are responsibilities that belong to all of humanity. Menglong's story, captured in that haunting video, will remain etched in the hearts of all who have seen it. His final words, trembling yet powerful, serve as a reminder that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, the courage to speak truth resonates far beyond the confines of life and death. His voice has awakened empathy, stirred collective conscience, and forged a connection between countless hearts that spans a globe. Through his struggle, Menglong has ensured that his legacy will endure, not as a tale of tragedy alone, but as a testament to the power of human courage, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of truth. If you felt the weight of Menglong's story, the pain of his final moments, and the power of his voice, then join us on K-Drama Spark, where we bring you the most compelling, emotional, and unforgettable stories from the world of drama, real-life mysteries, and the moments that move us all. Subscribe now and be part of a community that honors truth, celebrates courage, and never lets stories like Menglong's fade into silence.